They say the silence of a predator is more dangerous than its roar. But as my palm connected with the jaw of the most feared man in Seoul, the silence wasn't dangerous. It was deafening. I didn't care about his custom suit or the way his guards reached for their holsters. I only cared about the tears in my son's eyes. Welcome, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. If you've been riding with me, you know we don't do boy meets girl here. We do predator meets the one woman dangerous enough to tame him. We do the kind of chemistry that's mixed with gunpowder and bad decisions. Today, we aren't just unboxing a romance. We're unboxing a war zone. You're about to witness a collision between a woman who will burn the world for her son and a mafia lord who just realized his greatest weakness shares his Dina. Hit that like button before the first shot is fired. Subscribe because your obsession starts right now, and smash that notification bell, because in this world, silence gets you killed. Now, let's watch the Dragon of Busan meet his match. The stinging sensation in my hand was the only thing grounding me to reality. The rest of the Grand Hyatt's ballroom had dissolved into a blurred vignette of diamonds, tuxedos, and shocked gasps. 5 seconds ago, I was Janiyah Wright, the respectable head pediatric nurse at St. Mary's International, sipping tepid, sparkling water and hoping the donors would open their checkbooks for the new oncology wing. Now, I was the woman who had just assaulted a man who looked like he owned the air we were breathing. I didn't look at him. Not yet. My gaze was anchored to the floor where Cassian, my 5-year-old world, was dusting off his knees. He hadn't even scraped them. He had just tripped over the hem of a heavy velvet curtain while chasing a rogue balloon. It was a nothing moment, a child's clumsiness. But he had made it something else. "Get up," the man had said. The voice had been a low baritone, wrapped in silk and cruelty. "Tears are a waste of hydration. Stop crying like a weakling." That word, weakling. It triggered a protective rage in me that bypassed logic, bypassed fear, and went straight for the throat. Cassian wasn't weak. My son could recite the periodic table before he could tie his shoes. He had endured fevers that would break grown men without making a sound. He was crying because he was embarrassed, not because he was hurt. I grabbed Cassian's shoulder, pulling him behind the flared skirt of my emerald gown, finally lifting my eyes to the man I had just struck. The first thing I registered was the sheer size of him. He was towering, built like a fortress wrapped in a bespoke black suit that probably cost more than my nursing school tuition. His hair was swept back, severe and dark, framing a face that was devastatingly handsome and utterly terrifying. High cheekbones, a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and now, reddening slightly where my hand had made contact. Around us, the air pressure seemed to drop. 6 men in matching earpieces materialized from the shadows, their hands sliding inside their jackets. I knew that motion. I worked in the ER long enough to know what comes after that reach. "Ma'am, step back," one of the guards barked, his voice tight with panic. Not panic for him, panic for me. I didn't step back. I stepped forward. "He is 5 years old," I hissed, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. He tripped. He didn't fail a tactical assessment. He fell down. The man in the suit slowly turned his head back to center. He didn't look at his guards. He didn't look at the crowd whispering behind their champagne flutes. He looked at me. His eyes were dark voids, devoid of light, devoid of mercy. For a split second, a shiver of déjà vu rattled my spine, a ghost of a memory, a scent of sandalwood and rain, but I crushed it. The man I loved 6 years ago was dead, buried in a plot I was never allowed to visit. This man was just another rich bully who thought the world existed to be stepped on. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. His English was perfect, clipped and cold. "I don't care if you're the emperor of the universe," I snapped, pointing a manicured finger at his chest. "You do not speak to my son that way. You do not shame a child for being a child. If you want to bully someone, try someone your own size." Oh wait, that would require courage, wouldn't it? A collective gasp went through the room. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The guard closest to him stepped in, a gun half drawn. "Boss, I'll handle." The man raised a single hand. The guard froze instantly. The control he commanded was absolute, terrifying. He took a step toward me. The scent hit me then, expensive tobacco, cold air, and something dangerously masculine. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I refused to blink. If I was going to die tonight in front of Soul's elite, I would die standing between this monster and my son. Courage. He repeated the word as if tasting it. He reached up, his thumb brushing the corner of his lip where I'd struck him. You have terrible survival instincts, miss? Right, I said, lifting my chin. And my instincts are fine. I just have a low tolerance for arrogant pricks. He stared at me. For a long, agonizing moment, he just stared. I expected anger. I expected him to snap his fingers and have me dragged out. But instead, his eyes narrowed, scanning my face with a clinical, almost predatory curiosity. It was as if he were trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't realized was missing pieces. Then, his gaze shifted. He looked past me, down. I stiffened, stepping sideways to block Cassian, but Cassian, my brilliant, curious, frustratingly brave boy, stepped out from behind my dress. Cassian didn't cower. He didn't cry. He adjusted his small bow tie, tilted his head to the side, and looked up at the towering giant with an expression of intense, calculating analysis. It was the same look Cassian gave complex Lego sets or difficult math problems. The man froze. The cold indifference on his face fractured. His eyes locked onto Cassian's. Cassian stared back, his small brow furrowing in that specific, serious way he always did when he was thinking hard. He crossed his little arms over his chest, a gesture so innate, so unconsciously arrogant, that it mirrored the man standing in front of him perfectly. The man's breath hitched. It was subtle, barely a tremor in his chest, but I saw it. He took a step closer to Cassian, ignoring the guards, ignoring me, ignoring the gala. He crouched down. He was eye level with my son now. The man reached out a hand, hesitating for the first time. He didn't touch Cassian, but his fingers hovered near the boy's face, as if sensing the heat radiating from him. He looked at the sharp arch of Cassian's eyebrows, the stubborn set of his jaw, the dark, intelligent depth of his eyes. You aren't crying anymore, the man said softly. It was inefficient, Cassian replied, his high voice clear and shockingly calm. And you're rude. The man didn't get angry. A slow, disbelief-laden smirk touched his lips. He looked up at me, standing to his full height. The coldness was gone, replaced by a burning, intense shock that made my stomach drop. He looked from Cassian to me, and then back to Cassian. He saw the birthmark on Cassian's neck, the small crescent moon shape. His hand went to his own neck, unconsciously touching the collar of his shirt where I knew, instinctively, a matching mark lay hidden. That fire in your eyes, he whispered, his voice rough, losing its polished edge. I've seen it in the mirror every morning of my life. He took a step toward me, invading my personal space, his gaze piercing through my soul, stripping away the years, the secrets, and the lies. Who are you, Janiyah Wright? The worst part wasn't the guns. It wasn't the way the security detail formed a tight, impenetrable phalanx around us. It was the silence of the room. Moments ago, these people were sipping vintage Pinot Noir and discussing philanthropic tax write-offs. They were doctors, politicians, celebrities, people who claimed to stand for justice and order. But as the man I knew as Han placed a proprietary hand on the small of my back, a touch that burned through the silk of my dress like a brand, the crowd parted. They split like the Red Sea, but there was no Moses here, only a shark, guiding his prey into deeper waters. I caught the eye of the chief of surgery, a man I'd shared coffee with that very morning. He looked away, suddenly fascinated by the ice sculpture in the corner. That was the moment I understood the true geography of Seoul. There was the city on the map, and then there was the city he owned. Walk, Chan-gu murmured, his voice low enough that only I could hear it. It wasn't a request. I tightened my grip on Kosyan's hand. My son, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure, remained eerily quiet. He didn't ask where we were going. He just matched my stride, his small patent leather shoes clicking in rhythm with the heavy thud of combat boots surrounding us. We were swept out of the ballroom, through the gilded lobby, and into the humid night air. A convoy of black vehicles idled at the curb like hearses waiting for a funeral procession. The lead car, a sleek, monstrous Maybach, had its back door held open by a man with a scar running through his eyebrow. Get in, Chan-gu ordered. I hesitated, my heels digging into the pavement. My car is in the garage. I have to. Your car will be disposed of. Or returned. It matters very little. He nudged me, not roughly, but with an implacable force. Get in. I climbed inside. There was no choice. Not with Cassian beside me. The door shut with the finality of a coffin lid, sealing us in a vacuum of terrifying luxury. The interior of the Maybach was a sensory assault. It smelled of rich, supple leather that had never seen a speck of dust, mixed with the sharp, icy scent of expensive vodka and tobacco. But beneath that lay his scent. Sandalwood. Rain. A ghost I had spent 6 years trying to exorcise from my lungs. It clashed violently with the reality of my life, the faint, lingering smell of hospital antiseptic on my skin, and the scent of the artificial strawberry fruit snacks, currently crushed in Cassian's trouser pocket. 2 worlds, colliding in the backseat of a car that cost more than my entire apartment building. The engine purred to life, a silent beast waking up. As the car pulled away, the city lights of Seoul smeared into streaks of neon, blue, red, gold. I stared out the window, forcing my breathing to remain even. Han. 6 years ago, I was a nursing student on a study abroad program. He was just Han, the brooding, beautiful mystery I met in a jazz bar in Itaewon. We had 3 months. 3 months of fire and secrets and nights where the world outside the bedroom door ceased to exist. Then came the phone call. A stranger's voice. There was an accident. Gang violence. He's gone. Don't come to the funeral if you want to stay alive. I had mourned him. I had cried until my throat bled. I had returned to America, broken, carrying a secret life inside me. I named my son Cassian, a name that sounded as deep and unending as the ocean, because Han had once told me he wanted to see the Pacific. I came back to Korea a year ago for the position at St. Mary's because the pay was incredible and I wanted Cassian to know his heritage. I thought I was safe. I thought I was walking in a graveyard, not a lion's den. I didn't know Han was Han Shan-gu, the Titan of Busan. He doesn't blink much. The voice shattered my internal spiral. I turned. Chan-gu wasn't looking at me. He was sitting in the opposing seat, his long legs crossed, staring at Cassian. Cassian was sitting next to me, his hands folded neatly in his lap, staring right back. Most children cry in this situation, Chan-gu observed, his tone clinical, detached. They sense the danger. They weep for their mothers. I am calculating the probability of escape, Cassian said. The air left the car. Chan-gu's eyes widened, just a fraction. A flash of something, pride, sparked in the darkness of his gaze. And, Chan-gu asked, what is the probability? Low, Cassian admitted, sounding disappointed. The door handles are disabled. The glass is reinforced polycarbonate. And you have 4 guards in the trailing vehicle. I squeezed Cassian's hand, hard. Cassian, quiet. Let him speak, Chan-gu commanded, his gaze snapping to me. The heat in his eyes was almost unbearable. He is smarter than you were at his age. You were always impulsive, leading with your heart, slapping men you don't know. I knew a man once, I said, my voice trembling with a rage I couldn't suppress. But he died. Apparently, he was a liar too. Chan-gu's jaw tightened, a muscle feathered in his cheek. I didn't lie, Janaya. I was erased. There is a difference. Tell that to the candles I lit. I spat. Tell that to the son I raised alone because I thought his father was rotting in the ground. The words hung heavy in the air. The son I raised alone. He reached into his jacket pocket. For a second my heart stopped, fearing a weapon. But he pulled out a slim, black tablet. He tapped the screen twice and spun it around on the center console to face me. It was a digital dossier. My face stared back from the screen. My driver's license photo. My work history at St. Mary's. My current address in Mapo-gu. My bank records. And then, a birth certificate. Cassian Wright. Father, unknown. It took my team 4 minutes to scrub the hospital database, he said, his voice dropping an octave. I know where you live. I know you buy groceries on Tuesday nights. I know you work the night shift on Thursdays. I know everything, Janaya. If you threaten me. Threaten you? He laughed, a dark, humorless sound. I don't need to threaten what is already mine. The car began to slow down. I looked out the window. We weren't heading toward the river, toward the residential district where my small, safe apartment waited. We were heading up into the hills, toward the private estates that loomed over the city like gargoyles. The iron gates of a massive compound were opening ahead of us. "This isn't the way to Mapo-gu," I said, panic finally bleeding into my voice. "Take us home. Now." Chan-gu leaned forward. He moved with the sudden blurring speed of a viper. Before I could flinch, his hand was on the leather seat beside my head, boxing me in. His face was inches from mine. I could feel the heat radiating off him, smell the danger and the desire mixed into a potent cocktail that made my head spin. His dark eyes roamed over my face, searching for the girl he lost and finding the woman who survived him. "I don't believe in ghosts, Janaya," he whispered, the vibration of his voice humming against my skin. "But I am looking at a woman I saw buried 6 years ago and a boy who has my father's eyes. We aren't going to your apartment." He pulled back as the car came to a halt inside the compound walls, the heavy gates clanging shut behind us, sealing our fate. "You're coming to the fortress." If the Maybach was a cage, the building we arrived at was the prison block. They called it a residence, but that was a lie. It was a monolith of gray limestone and bulletproof glass, carved into the hillside like a scar. There were no flower beds, no welcome mats, only high walls topped with sensors and cameras that tracked our arrival with mechanical indifference. It was beautiful in the way a stealth bomber is beautiful, sleek, expensive, and designed to kill. The car stopped in a circular driveway that looked more like a helipad. The door clicked open. "Cassian," I said, my voice tight. "Stay close to me." "I like the architecture," Cassian noted, looking up at the towering brutalist structure. "It's very defensible." Chan-gu stepped out, buttons his jacket. He didn't look at the house. He looked at the perimeter, his eyes scanning for threats that didn't exist. He signaled for us to follow. We walked into a foyer that could have swallowed my entire apartment complex. The floors were black marble, polished to a mirror shine that reflected our distorted silhouettes. The air was chilled, smelling of ozone and silence. But the silence didn't last. "Boss." The shout came from the hallway to the left. A set of double doors burst open, and 3 men stumbled in, dragging a 4th man between them. The injured man was pale, clutching his abdomen, blood seeping through his fingers and dripping onto the pristine marble floor. "Ambush on the south route," one of the men panted. They were waiting for the decoy car. Chan-gu didn't flinch. He didn't rush forward. He stood perfectly still, his face a mask of cold fury. "Is the doctor here?" "Traffic," the guard gasped. "He's 20 minutes out." "Minho is fading, boss." The injured man groaned, his knees buckling. They dropped him to the floor, the metallic smell of blood instantly overpowering the expensive cologne in the room. I looked at the man on the floor. He was young, too young. His lips were turning blue. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. The part of me that was a frightened captive vanished, replaced instantly by the part of me that ran the busiest pediatric ER in Seoul. "Put him flat," I barked, dropping Cassian's hand. "Now." The guards froze, looking at me with confusion. Did I stutter? I shouted, stepping over the expensive rug and dropping to my knees beside the bleeding man. "Lay him flat to maintain blood flow to the brain." "You," I pointed at the biggest guard. "Give me your belt. Now." I didn't wait for permission. I ripped the silk tie off the injured boy's neck and pressed it into the wound. He screamed. "Keep pressure here," I ordered the guard holding him. I looked up at Chan-gu. He wasn't moving. He was watching me. His eyes were dark, dilated, fixed on my blood-stained hands. "Don't just stand there posing. I need a med kit. Gauze, saline, hemostats if you have them. And get my son out of the room." Chan-gu blinked, the trance breaking. He snapped his fingers. "Do as she says. Take the boy to the library." "Mom?" Cassian's voice wavered. "Go, Cassian. I'm working." As the guards scrambled, obeying my commands with terrified efficiency, I went to work. I packed the wound, checked his vitals, and stabilized his crashing pressure. For 10 minutes, I wasn't a prisoner. I was the charge nurse. I was in control. By the time the house doctor rushed in, breathless and sweating, the bleeding had stopped. I stood up, wiping my hands on a towel a maid had handed me. My emerald gown was ruined, stained with the dark crimson of a stranger's blood. I looked up. Chan-gu was leaning against a marble pillar, his arms crossed. He hadn't looked at the injured man once. He had only looked at me. The expression on his face was terrifying. It wasn't gratitude. It was possession. It was the look of a man who had just discovered a weapon he didn't know he owned. "Clean her up," he said softly to the maid. "Then bring her to my office." 30 minutes later, I slammed the heavy oak door of his office shut behind me. I had scrubbed the blood off my hands, but I couldn't scrub away the adrenaline. I was wearing a fresh robe they had provided, silk, black, too big, because they had taken my dress to be cleaned. Chan-gu was sitting behind a desk that looked like it was carved from the hull of a ship. He was pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. "You have steady hands," he said, sliding a glass across the mahogany surface. "I want my son," I said, ignoring the drink, "and I want a car to take us home." "Home," he repeated. He picked up a remote and pressed a button. The wall behind him, which I thought was a solid panel, slid open to reveal a massive screen. On it was a live feed of an apartment building. My apartment building. "I bought it," he said casually, taking a sip of his drink. I froze. "What?" "The building. The land it sits on. I bought it 20 minutes ago. My holding company also just paid off the remaining 40 million won of your nursing school loans. And, purely for efficiency, I had your resignation letter sent to St. Mary's." The room spun. You can't do that." "I can." I did. He stood up, walking around the desk. "You are homeless, unemployed, and debt-free. You have nowhere to go, Janaya. You arrogant son of a—" I lunged for the desk, grabbing the heavy file folder sitting there, the contract, and hurling it at his chest. Papers scattered across the floor like confetti. "I am not a piece of property you can acquire. I am a mother. I am a professional." "Exactly," he said, his voice dropping to a growl. He stepped into my space, forcing me back until my hips hit the edge of the desk. He didn't touch me, but he caged me in with his body, his hands planting on the wood on either side of my waist. "You are a professional," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "And I need a professional. You saved my man downstairs. You have fire. You have skills. I won't work for a criminal. You'll work for the father of your child." The air left my lungs. "Cassian is a target now," he said, the cruelty in his voice replaced by a stark, brutal honesty. "My enemies were at that gala. They saw him. They saw me look at him. If you walk out that door, you won't make it to the main road before someone snatches him to get to me. Is that what you want? Do you want his blood on your hands, Janaya?" "You did this," I whispered, tears of rage stinging my eyes. "You brought this danger to us, and now I am the only wall standing between him and the fire." He reached out, his thumb brushing the pulse point on my neck. My heart was hammering against his finger. He could feel my fear. He could feel my hate. And God help me, he could feel the treacherous spark of electricity that still arced between us after 6 years of silence. "The job is simple," he murmured. "You stay here. You live here. You are his protector. You are my private medical consultant. You have full access to everything, except the exit. And if I refuse, you won't." He leaned in, his lips brushing my ear, his heat enveloping me completely. "You can hate me, Janaya. You can try to run. But every breath that boy takes is now protected by my blood. You signed your freedom away the moment you let me see his face. Sunlight didn't enter this house, it was permitted access. I woke up in a bed large enough to sleep a family of 5, tangled in sheets made of Egyptian cotton so high a thread count they felt like water against my skin. For a moment, just a split second between dreams and wakefulness, I reached out for the alarm clock in my cramped apartment in Mapo-gu. My hand hit cold, polished marble instead. Reality crashed back in. The gala, the slap, the fortress. I threw off the covers and marched to the walk-in closet. It was larger than my old kitchen, and it was full. Rows of garments hung like silent soldiers, silks, cashmeres, velvets. Everything was in my size. Everything smelled of lavender sachets and money. He was trying to dress a doll. I ran my hand over a backless evening gown that cost more than a kidney transplant. "Not today, Satan," I muttered. I bypassed the frills and the seduction pieces. I found a pair of high-waisted, wide-leg trousers in a severe slate gray and a crisp white blouse that buttoned to the neck. I didn't dress for a date. I dressed for a shift. If I was going to be the medical consultant, I was going to look like one. Dinner was an exercise in absurdity. The dining table was a slab of obsidian long enough to land a plane on. Chan-gu sat at the head, looking like a king on a dark throne. Cassian and I were seated to his right, the distance between us and him feeling like a canyon. The silence was only broken by the clink of silver against china. Servants moved like ghosts, placing plates of Wagyu beef and truffle-infused potatoes in front of us. I stared at the plate. Then I looked at the chef, who was hovering nervously by the door. "This is a pediatric cardiac nightmare," I announced. The chef stiffened. Chan-gu stopped cutting his steak. "Excuse me?" Chan-gu asked, his voice low. "The sodium content in this sauce alone is enough to spike a hypertensive crisis," I said, pointing my fork at the meat. "And for a 5-year-old? His kidneys are still developing. He needs balanced macros, not a heart attack garnished with gold leaf." I looked at Chan-gu. "You want him protected? Start with his arteries. Get us some steamed vegetables and grilled chicken. No salt." The chef looked terrified, waiting for the execution order. Chan-gu stared at me. He chewed slowly, swallowed, and then a ghost of a smirk touched his lips. He looked at the chef. "You heard the consultant. Vegetables. No salt." As the chef scrambled away, Chan-gu leaned back, swirling his wine. "You are difficult to please, Janaya. I'm not here to be pleased." I shot back, cutting Cassian's meat into tiny pieces. "I'm here to keep my son alive, even if it's from your hospitality." After dinner, we retreated to the playroom. If my apartment was a shoebox, this room was a toy store. It had floor-to-ceiling shelves of Lego sets, rare action figures, and a coding station that rivaled NASA's setup. But despite the abundance, the room felt sterile. Cold. Cassian sat in the center of the plush rug, dismantling a complex robotic arm he'd found. He was quiet. Too quiet. He hadn't spoken since we arrived. I sat on the window seat watching him, my heart aching. He was internalizing the stress. He was like a little sponge soaking up the tension of this house. Then I felt it, the prickle on the back of my neck. I scanned the room. There, hidden in the eye of a stuffed bear on the high shelf, the glint of a lens. I stood up, walked directly to the shelf, and stared right into the glass eye. "I know you're watching," I said, my voice sharp. "You sit in your tower staring at screens like a coward. If you want to know him, come down here. Stop studying him like a lab rat and talk to your son." I held the gaze for 10 seconds. Then, the heavy door behind me clicked open. I turned. Chan-gu stood there. He had ditched his jacket. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a tattoo of a dragon winding around his wrist, a mark I remembered tracing with my fingertips a lifetime ago. He didn't look at me. He walked past me, carrying the scent of sandalwood and rain, and sat down on the rug opposite Cassian. Cassian didn't look up. He was struggling with the servo motor of the robot arm. It wouldn't align. Chan-gu watched him for a long minute. He didn't coo. He didn't use a baby voice. "The torque is too high," Chan-gu said. His voice was deep, rumbling in the quiet room. Cassian paused. He looked at the robot, then at Chan-gu. "It needs to grip," Cassian said, his brow furrowed. "It can't grip if the gear strips," Chan-gu countered. He reached out. "May I?" Cassian hesitated. He was possessive of his projects. But he nodded. Chan-gu took the small screwdriver. His hands, usually instruments of violence, were shockingly precise. He adjusted a tension screw inside the mechanism, a movement so subtle I barely saw it. "You have to bypass the limiter," Chan-gu murmured, handing it back. "Rules are for the hardware. Software overrides them." Cassian took the robot back. He typed a quick command into the attached tablet. The arm whirred to life, snapping shut with perfect precision and speed, twice as fast as the manual said it should go. Cassian's eyes went wide. He looked at the robot, then at Chan-gu. The admiration in his face was instant and terrifyingly pure. "You hacked it," Cassian whispered. "I optimized it," Chan-gu corrected. And then, it happened. Cassian threw his head back and let out a laugh. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a belly laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated delight. It was a sound I hadn't heard since we left America. It bounced off the cold walls, warming the room instantly. "Do it again," Cassian demanded, shoving another robot at the most dangerous man in Korea. Chan-gu froze. The sound of that laugh seemed to hit him harder than my slap had. He looked at the boy, his boy, and the mask of the Mafia boss cracked. For the first time I saw the man beneath, the man who had been lonely for 6 years. He picked up the second robot. "Okay. Watch closely." I stood in the corner, my arms wrapped around myself, feeling a dangerous lump form in my throat. I wanted to hate him. I needed to hate him. But watching them, two geniuses with the same eyes, speaking a language only they understood, it chipped away at my armor. An hour later, Cassian was asleep on the rug, clutching the robot. I carried him to the bed in the adjoining room, tucking him in. When I stepped back into the hallway, Chan-gu was waiting. The lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across the marble. He was leaning against the wall, staring at the floor. When he looked up, the air between us pulled tight, charged with an electricity that made my skin prickle. "He is brilliant," Chan-gu said softly, "like you." "He's stubborn," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "Like you." Chan-gu pushed off the wall and took a step toward me. He stopped just outside of touching distance. The smell of him was overwhelming, masculine, heady, intoxicating. He looked at the closed door of Cassian's room, then back to me. His eyes were dark, swirling with a conflict that mirrored my own. "I brought you here to protect my blood," he said, his voice rough, like gravel over silk. "I thought I was securing an asset." He looked at my mouth, then up to my eyes. The intensity of his gaze pinned me to the spot. "I didn't realize," he whispered, "that you'd be the one to make it start pumping again." The sky over Seoul didn't just break, it shattered. The storm had rolled in off the Yellow Sea an hour ago, turning the night into a violent strobe light of purple and white. The thunder wasn't a rumble, it was a detonation. It shook the limestone walls of the fortress, rattling the reinforced glass like a cage being kicked by a giant. For most people, it was just weather. For me, it was a time machine. Crack boom. I flinched, dropping the glass of water I'd been trying to drink in the sanctuary of my bathroom. It smashed against the tile, but I didn't hear it. I heard the echo of mortar fire. I smelled cordite and burning rubber. The phantom ache in my left shoulder flared, a sharp biting pain that had nothing to do with barometric pressure and everything to do with a life I had buried under scrubs and nursing degrees. I couldn't stay in the bedroom. The walls felt too close, too much like a bunker. I tightened the sash of my silk robe, a sliver of silver fabric that felt like a second skin, and opened the door. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from the lightning flashing through the skylights, illuminating the marble floor in brief ghostly bursts. I walked toward the main salon. I needed space. I needed to see the storm, to prove to my racing heart that the explosions were just nature, not man-made. I wasn't alone. The main salon was a cavern of shadows. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the violence outside. Standing in front of them, silhouetted against the chaos, was Chan-gu. He held a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand. The other rested against the cool glass of the window. He was watching the lightning strike the hills with a stillness that was unnatural. He looked like he was commanding the storm, or perhaps negotiating with it. I should have turned back. But my feet were bare, silent on the rugs, and I was drawn to him like a moth to a flame that would inevitably burn its wings. "You can't sleep," he said. He didn't turn around. He didn't have to. The man had the senses of a wolf. "The thunder is loud," I lied, my voice steady but husky. Liar. He turned then. A bolt of lightning tore through the sky, flooding the room with a harsh, blinding white light. It stripped away the shadows. It stripped away my defenses. The robe I wore was thin. The light cut through the silk. but more importantly, it caught the exposed skin of my shoulder where the fabric had slipped. There, marred against the smooth, dark skin of my deltoid and trailing down toward my scapula, was a map of violence. A jagged, ugly keloid scar. It wasn't the clean slice of a surgical scalpel. It was the messy, chaotic tear of shrapnel. A souvenir from a medical mission near the DMZ that the official record said never happened. Chan-gu froze. The glass in his hand tilted, the ice clinking softly. His eyes, usually so guarded, went wide. He wasn't looking at my face. He was looking at the scar. The darkness returned as the lightning faded, but the image was burned into the room. Janaya, he breathed. The name sounded like a prayer and a curse. He set the glass down on a side table with a heavy thud and crossed the room. He moved with a predatory grace, closing the distance between us until I could smell the scotch on his breath and the heat radiating from his chest. I instinctively stepped back, pulling the robe up to cover myself. "Don't. Show me," he commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was a whisper wrapped in iron. "It's nothing. A car accident. Years ago." Another lie. He reached out. His hand, large and calloused, hovered over my shoulder. He didn't grab me. He waited. The air between us crackled, charged with more electricity than the storm outside. I know what a car accident looks like. That is a burn. That is metal tearing through flesh. That is war. He gently, almost reverently, pushed the silk aside. I stopped breathing. No one had touched that scar in years. Not since Cassian was born. It was my secret shame, my reminder of the violence I was capable of. His fingertips grazed the raised skin. His touch was shockingly cool against my burning flesh. He traced the jagged line of the scar, his touch feather light, exploring the topography of my pain. "Who did this to you?" The rage in his voice was terrifying. It was a low, vibrating growl that seemed to come from the center of the earth. He wasn't disgusted. He was furious. Not at me, but for me. "It was a different life," I whispered, shivering under his touch. "Before Cassian. Before I learned that healing was harder than killing." His eyes snapped to mine. The admission hung in the air. Harder than killing. He looked at me with a new expression. The curiosity was gone, replaced by a dark, simmering recognition. He saw the monster in me, the survivor, and he didn't run. He welcomed it. "We are a matched set, then," he murmured. He took my hand and guided it to his chest, pressing my palm flat against his dress shirt. I could feel the heavy, powerful thud of his heart. Under his shirt, I felt the ridges of something hard, thick scar tissue running across his ribs. "A knife," he said simply. "When I was 12, my father's rival thought I was too slow. He was wrong. But he left a reminder." He stepped closer. We were chest to chest now. The storm raged outside, wind howling against the glass, but inside, the silence was heavy, thick with desire. He looked down at me, his eyes searching my face, dropping to my lips. My breath hitched. My body betrayed me, leaning into him, seeking his warmth, seeking the oblivion that only he could offer. His hand moved from my shoulder to cup my neck. His thumb brushed my jawline. He lowered his head. I closed my eyes, tilting my chin up, waiting for the collision. His breath ghosted over my lips. "Janaya." I could taste the scotch on his tongue. I could feel the danger. I wanted it. God, I wanted it. But then, he froze. The hand on my neck tightened for a split second, then released. He pulled back, putting a foot of cold, empty space between us. My eyes flew open. He was looking at me, his chest heaving slightly, his pupils blown wide with a hunger that terrified me, but his jaw was set in a line of brutal control. "Go to sleep, Janaya," he rasped, his voice rough, like he was swallowing glass. "Go back to your room." "Chan-gu, go," he ordered, turning his back to me to face the storm again. He gripped his own wrist, the dragon tattoo flexing, as if restraining himself from reaching out again. "Go before I forget that you are my employee. Go before I forget that you are only Cassian's mother." I stood there for a moment, trembling, my skin cold where his hand had been. The rejection stung, but beneath it I heard the warning. He wasn't sending me away because he didn't want me. He was sending me away because he wanted me too much. I pulled my robe tight, turned on my heel, and fled into the darkness, leaving him alone with the thunder and the ghosts we both couldn't outrun. My fierce hearts, the storm outside isn't the only one raging. What do you think Janaya's scars truly mean? And what life is she hiding? And that moment, was Chan Gu's touch a comfort, or a warning that he's getting too close to the truth? Let me know in the comments below. A dress is just armor with sequins. That's what I told myself as I stared into the full-length mirror. The mirror. Chan Gu had sent a rack of pastel, docile gowns, the kind worn by women who smile and nod. I sent them back. If I was going into the lion's den, I wasn't going as a lamb. I chose a gown of my own selection, midnight blue velvet, structured and sharp, with a slit that ran dangerously high up my left thigh. It wasn't for seduction. It was for access. I lifted the heavy velvet hem. Secured against my thigh by a black lace garter was a ceramic scalpel. Non-metallic. Undetectable by wands. Razor sharp. I was a nurse. I knew exactly where the femoral artery was. If anyone touched me, I wouldn't need to overpower them. I would just need to nick them in the right spot and wait 3 minutes for them to bleed out. I smoothed the dress down. I wasn't Janaya the nurse tonight. I wasn't even Janaya the mother. I was the ghost. Ready? Chan Gu stood in the doorway. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, all sharp lines and expensive wool. He stopped when he saw me. His eyes raked over the dress, the exposed column of my neck, the dark lipstick I'd applied like war paint. You look. He paused, searching for the word. Lethal. That's the point, I said, grabbing my clutch. Let's get this over with. The business summit was held at the Floating Island Convention Center, a glass bubble sitting on the Han River. It was a gathering of the most powerful people in Asia, CEOs, politicians, and the shadow figures who pulled their strings. When we stepped out of the car, the air shifted. Chan Gu offered me his arm. I took it. His muscles were rock-hard beneath the fabric. He pulled me close, closer than necessary, locking my body against his side. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a statement. Mine. We walked through the double doors. The room went silent. It was the same silence as the night of the slap, but heavier. Hundreds of eyes turned to us. They looked at the dragon of Busan, the man who supposedly never forgave an insult, walking arm in arm with the woman who had publicly humiliated him. Keep your head high, Chan Gu whispered, his lips brushing my ear as we walked through the parting crowd. To your left. The man in the gray suit. Senator Kim. He takes bribes in Bitcoin. To your right, the woman in red. Madam Lee. She runs the Port Authority and hasn't paid a legitimate tax in 40 years. Charming friends you have, I murmured, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. They aren't friends. They are food. He steered me toward the center of the room. His hand never left the small of my back. His thumb traced small possessive circles against the velvet of my dress, a constant reminder of his claim. It was infuriating. It was intoxicating. Han Chan Gu. The voice was like oil slicking over gravel. We stopped. A man blocked our path. He was older, with silver hair slicked back and a smile that showed too many teeth. He held a glass of champagne like a weapon. My blood ran cold. I recognized him from the dossier Chan Gu had shown me. Director Sang-hoon, the man who ordered the hit 6 years ago. The man who told me Han was dead. Director, Chan Gu said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Chan Gu didn't bow. He didn't smile. He went still, the absolute stillness of a tiger before the pounce. I didn't expect to see you here. I thought you were retiring. The world is too interesting to leave just yet. Sang-hoon chuckled. His eyes, milky and predatory, slid from Chan Gu to me. He looked me up and down with a sneer of undisguised contempt. And who is this? Sang-hoon asked, swirling his wine. I didn't know you had a taste for exotic imports. Is she the help? Or just a rental for the evening? The insult hung in the air, thick and ugly. Chan Gu's hand tightened on my waist. I felt the tension coil in his body, a spring about to snap. The guards behind Sang-hoon shifted, hands moving toward their jackets. Careful, Director, Chan Gu said softly, His voice was terrifyingly polite. "You are speaking to my fiancé, and unlike you, I do not rent loyalty. I earn it." Sang-hoon laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Fiancé? A nurse? Come now, Chan-gu. Don't dilute the bloodline. You need a queen, not a servant who knows how to empty a bedpan." Chan-gu took a step forward. Violence was imminent. I squeezed Chan-gu's arm, stopping him. I didn't need a white knight. I had a scalpel on my thigh and a tongue sharper than any blade. I stepped forward, breaking Chan-gu's hold, and smiled at Sang-hoon. It was my best charge nurse smile, the one I used on drunk patients before I sedated them. "Director Sang-hoon, isn't it?" I said, my voice projecting clearly over the hushed crowd. He blinked, surprised I was speaking. "Yes?" "I couldn't help but notice," I said, my eyes scanning his face clinically. "The yellowing of the sclera in your eyes, the spider angiomas on your neck, the slight tremor in your left hand holding that glass." I took a step closer, invading his personal space. "You speak of bloodlines, Director, but yours is currently poisoning you. That's late-stage liver failure, isn't it? If you don't stop drinking that champagne, you won't live long enough to worry about who Chan-gu marries. You'll be dead before the fiscal quarter ends." The crowd gasped. Sang-hoon turned a violent shade of red. He lowered his glass, his hand shaking visibly now that I had pointed it out. "You insolent—" "I'm not insolent," I interrupted, linking my arm back through Chan-gu's. "I'm a professional, and you, Director, are a patient running out of time. Enjoy the party." I felt Chan-gu's chest rumble. He wasn't growling. He was laughing. A silent, dark laugh of triumph. Music. Chan-gu barked at the orchestra. The band hurriedly struck up a waltz. Chan-gu swept me onto the dance floor before Sang-hoon could recover. He pulled me into his frame. His hand engulfed mine. We spun, the world blurring into a streak of gold and light. "Liver failure?" he murmured, his eyes dancing with dark amusement. "Is that true?" "He has 6 months. Maybe 4, I replied, breathless. But I might have accelerated his stress levels. "You are dangerous, Janaya. I told you. I'm not a doll." "No," he whispered, pulling me flush against him so our bodies moved as one. "You are a queen." For a moment, in the middle of the dance floor, I forgot the contract. I forgot the gunfight. I just felt him. The strength of his hand, the heat of his body, the way he looked at me like I was the only thing in the universe that mattered. Then, I saw it. Over Chan-gu's shoulder, up on the mezzanine balcony. A flash. Not a camera flash, the glint of a lens adjusting in the dark. A man in a maintenance uniform was tracking us. I stiffened. Chan-gu. Balcony. 3 o'clock. Chan-gu didn't look. He didn't break the rhythm of the waltz. He just spun us, putting his broad back between me and the shooter, shielding me with his own body. "I see him," he whispered against my hair. "Is it a sniper?" "Recon," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "They are taking pictures. They want proof of your face. Proof of the weakness. What do we do?" He pulled me closer, his grip bruising. "Don't look up," he commanded. "Smile. Smile like you love me. Smile like we are the happiest couple in Seoul. If they want a show, let's give them a tragedy." I looked up at him. I forced a smile onto my lips, but my eyes were wide with fear. "The war has officially started, Janaya. Happiness is a trap. It softens your edges, dulls your reflexes, and makes you forget that in a world built on violence, peace is just the reloading phase." For 2 hours, I forgot. The morning sun was streaming through the bulletproof glass of the kitchen, turning the marble counters into a sea of gold. The air smelled of brewing espresso and pancakes. It was domestic. It was terrifyingly normal. Chan-gu stood at the stove, wearing gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt that stretched tight across his back. He wasn't the Titan of Busan right now. He was just a man trying to flip a pancake without breaking it. "It's all in the wrist," I teased, sitting at the island with a mug of coffee. "The viscosity of the batter is inconsistent," he grumbled, though a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He successfully flipped one, landing it on Cassian's plate. Cassian, sitting next to me, clapped. "Good job, father." The word hung in the air. Father. Chan-gu froze. He looked at Cassian, his eyes softening in a way that made my chest ache. He reached out, ruffling Cassian's hair with a hand that had broken bones and signed death warrants. "Eat up, smart guy," Chan-gu said softly. Then he looked at me. The heat in his gaze wasn't the predatory hunger of the night before. It was warmer. He walked around the island, leaning in until his face was inches from mine. "Last night," he murmured, his thumb brushing my lower lip. "You were incredible. I haven't seen anyone shut Sang-hoon down like that in a decade." "I just told the truth," I whispered. "Maybe," he said, leaning closer, his eyes dropping to my mouth. "Or maybe you really are a queen." He was going to kiss me. And God help me, I was going to let him. I leaned forward, closing the gap. Slam, the kitchen doors burst open, hitting the walls with a crack like a gunshot. Chan-gu spun around, his body instantly shifting from lover to killer. He placed himself between us and the door before I could even blink. It was head of security, Min-sok. Behind him were 3 armed guards. They weren't in standby mode. Their weapons were drawn. "Put the weapons away," Chan-gu barked, his voice dropping to a growl. "You are scaring the boy." "I can't do that, boss," Min-sok said. He didn't look at Chan-gu. He was looking at me, and the look in his eyes was pure, unadulterated hatred. "Explain," Chan-gu said. The temperature in the room plummeted. Min-sok stepped forward, holding out a tablet. "We ran a sweep of the network traffic from last night. During the gala, while you were dancing." Chan-gu took the tablet. He swiped through the screen. Once. Twice. His back went rigid. The relaxed posture of the morning vanished, replaced by the tension of a steel cable about to snap. "This is a mistake," Chan-gu said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's not," Min-sok insisted. "Outgoing transmission. Encrypted. Level 5 masking. It originated from her phone, boss." The timestamps matched the moment she stepped onto the balcony. Chan-gu turned slowly. The man who had looked at me with warmth 10 seconds ago was gone. In his place was the dragon. His eyes were void of light, 2 black holes that swallowed everything. "Who did you send it to?" he asked. His voice was so quiet it was terrifying. "Send what?" I stood up, my heart hammering. "I didn't send anything. I don't even have the encryption keys for. Don't lie." Chan-gu roared. The sound shook the room. Cassian whimpered, sliding off his stool to hide behind my legs. Chan-gu threw the tablet onto the marble island. It slid across the surface, stopping right in front of me. I looked down. It was a chat log. Sender: J. Wright. Recipient: Director Sang-hoon. Message: Target confirmed. The heir is viable. Trust established. Proceed with Phase 2. "I didn't write this," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and fury. "Chan-gu, this is a deep fake. Anyone could have cloned my email. Look at the syntax. Heir is viable? I don't talk like that." "No," he said, stepping closer. "But a ghost does." He reached out and grabbed my arm, the arm with a scar. His grip was bruising. "The scars. The combat triage. The way you handled Sang-hoon." "I thought you were a survivor," he hissed. His face inches from mine, twisted in a grimace of betrayal. "But you're just an operative. You played me. You used my son to get inside. I am his mother." I screamed, trying to yank my arm free. "I would never put him in danger. You already have." He released me with a shove that sent me stumbling back against the cabinets. His hand went to his waistband. He pulled his gun. "Boss," Min-sok warned. "Not in front of the kid." Chan-gu stared at me down the barrel of the gun. The black metal eye didn't blink. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. For a second, I thought he would do it. I thought he would end me right there in the kitchen where we made pancakes. "Get out," he whispered. "Chan-gu, please. Get out." He screamed. "Before I put a bullet in your heart to see if it's as black as mine." I scrambled to grab Cassian. "Come on, baby. We're leaving." "No." Chan-gu signaled the guards. 2 men grabbed me. Another grabbed Cassian. "No. Mommy." Cassian screamed, thrashing in the guard's arms. "Let me go." "Father, make them stop." "Take the boy to the safe room," Chan-gu ordered, not looking at his son. He kept his gun trained on me. "He stays." The asset is compromised, but the heir remains. He is not an asset. I fought, kicking and scratching. I landed a solid blow on one guard's throat, but the other slammed the butt of his rifle into my ribs. I gasped, the air leaving my lungs. Chan-gu, don't do this. They're setting you up. Look at the timestamp. It's a plant. Throw her out, Chan-gu said, turning his back on me. If she steps foot on the property again, kill her. They didn't drive me to the city. They dragged me to the main gate and shoved me onto the asphalt. You're lucky he still has a soft spot, Min-sok sneered, throwing my purse after me. I would have buried you in the woods. The heavy iron gates groaned, swinging shut with a final booming clang that echoed like a prison sentence. I lay on the wet pavement, gasping for air, clutching my bruised ribs. The rain had started again, cold and unforgiving, soaking through my thin blouse. Inside the walls, my son was crying. Inside the walls, the man I loved, yes, God help me, loved, thought I was a traitor. I should have been broken. I should have curled up and wept. But as the rain washed the blood from my lip, something else happened. The tears stopped. I sat up. I pushed the wet hair out of my face. I looked at the towering fortress, at the security cameras blinking red on the walls. Min-sok. The timing was too perfect. The evidence was too neat, and he had been the one to find it. I wasn't the spy. I was the obstacle. They needed me gone so they could get to Chan-gu. They needed the mother out of the way so they could manipulate the heir. I stood up. I wiped the mud from my knees. My eyes, which had been full of panic moments ago, went cold. Dead cold. I turned to the camera mounted on the gate pillar. I stared directly into the lens, knowing Min-sok was watching. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. You think you're protecting him by sending me away, I whispered, my voice lost in the wind but my intent clear. You just opened the door for them to kill you both. I turned and began to walk. Not toward the city, but into the shadows. The nurse was gone. The ghost was back. And she was going to burn that fortress to the ground to get her son back. A nurse heals. A mother nurtures. A ghost eliminates. The basement of the abandoned veterinary clinic in Incheon smelled of bleach and animal fear. It was fitting. I stood in front of a cracked mirror, but the woman staring back wasn't Janiyah Wright, the head pediatric nurse. She was gone. I tightened the straps of the Kevlar vest over my chest. It was stolen tech, lightweight but rated to stop a 9mm slug. I didn't have a tactical belt, I had a modified surgical kit. In the loop on my left thigh, 4 syringes of concentrated epinephrine. In the sheath on my right boot, a ceramic combat knife. In my hand, a silenced P226 Sig Sauer I dug out of a cache I buried 6 years ago, just before I decided to be a good person. Being good nearly got my son killed. I racked the slide. The sound was a crisp, mechanical promise. I wasn't going to the fortress to negotiate. I wasn't going to prove my innocence. I was going to perform a surgery. The tumor was Min-sok, and the procedure was going to be invasive. The fortress was burning. I could smell it from the perimeter wall, the acrid scent of melting plastic and expensive wood. The sensors on the outer wall were dead, disabled from the inside. Min-sok hadn't just opened the door, he had rolled out the red carpet for Sang-hoon's kill squad. I didn't take the front gate. That was a kill box. I moved to the north face of the limestone monolith. During my exile in the Golden Cage, I had memorized every inch of this prison. I knew the climate control vents for the wine cellar were wider than standard code. I slipped through the grate, dropping into the cool, dark shaft. I crawled. My elbows scraped against the metal, but I didn't feel it. I only felt the pounding rhythm of my heart, beating a frantic war drum. Cassian. 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 I dropped out of the vent into the pantry, landing silently in a crouch. The house sounded like a slaughterhouse. Gunfire echoed from the main foyer. Heavy boots stomped on the marble above. I moved. I flowed through the shadows of the kitchen, the same kitchen where Chan-gu had made pancakes 48 hours ago. Now, it was riddled with bullet holes. A maid's body lay by the refrigerator. I didn't stop. I couldn't save the dead. I reached the service door that opened onto the mezzanine overlooking the foyer. I froze. Below me, the grand entrance hall was a war zone. The obsidian floor was slick with blood. Bodies, Changu's loyal guards, were scattered like broken toys. And there, behind an overturned marble table near the library doors, was Changu. He was a wreck. His tuxedo shirt was torn, soaked in crimson at the shoulder. He was firing his handgun with his left hand, his right arm hanging uselessly by his side. He was pale, sweating, backed into a corner. 6 mercenaries in full tactical gear were advancing on him in a phalanx. They weren't rushing, they were toying with him. They knew the dragon of Busan was defanged. "Give up the boy, Han," one of them shouted, "and we'll make it quick." Changu didn't answer. He just fired again, dropping a man. But his magazine clicked empty. He dropped the gun. He reached for a knife on his belt, swaying on his feet. He was going to die. He was going to die protecting the door to the room where he thought Cassian was safe. I pulled the pin on the flashbang I'd rigged from magnesium flares. "Close your eyes, Changu," I whispered. I dropped the grenade over the railing. Bang! A supernova of white light detonated in the center of the foyer. The mercenaries screamed, clutching their eyes. I didn't wait for the ring to fade. I vaulted over the railing. I hit the floor in a roll, coming up behind the lead mercenary. Before he could blink the spots from his vision, I drove the ceramic knife into the gap between his helmet and his vest. Severed spinal cord. He dropped without a sound. I spun. 2 shots. Thwip. Thwip. The second and third men fell, holes in their temples. The fourth man, blinking blindly, swung his rifle wildly. I ducked under the barrel, sweeping his legs. As he hit the marble, I didn't shoot. I jammed a syringe of pure epinephrine into his carotid artery. His heart would explode in 30 seconds. The last 2 men scrambled back, realizing the predator had changed. I raised my weapon, my face a mask of stone. 2 clean shots. Silence returned to the foyer, broken only by the gurgling of the dying men and the heavy, ragged breathing of the man behind the table. I turned. Changu was staring at me. He was slumped against the marble, his face gray, his eyes wide with shock. He still held his knife, trembling, pointed vaguely in my direction. He looked at the bodies. He looked at the tactical gear. He looked at the woman he had thrown out into the rain. "Janaya?" He rasped, blood bubbling on his lips. You're the spy." I walked over to him. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't hug him. I holstered my weapon and crouched down, grabbing his chin to force him to look at me. "I am not a spy," I said, my voice cold and hard as steel. "I am a mother. And you are bleeding out." I ripped the hem of my shirt, pressing the fabric into his shoulder wound. He groaned, his head lolling back. "Why?" He whispered. "I exiled you." "Because you were stupid," I snapped. "And because my son needs a father, even if that father is an idiot who trusts the wrong people." I grabbed a discarded rifle from a dead mercenary and shoved it into his good hand. "Can you stand?" "I think my leg is broken." I didn't ask for a diagnosis. I asked if you can stand. He looked at me. The shock in his eyes began to fade, replaced by a flicker of the fire I knew. He gritted his teeth, a low growl building in his throat. He used the rifle as a crutch and hauled himself up, swaying but upright. "Good," I said. "Save the questions for later. If you want our son to see the sunrise, you're going to help me kill the rest of these people." He nodded, a grim smile touching his bloody lips. "Yes, ma'am." Then a sound tore through the silence, a scream, high-pitched. Terrified. Cassian. It came from the library. The safe room. Changu's head snapped toward the double doors. No. The doors creaked open. Minsok stepped out. He was using Cassian as a human shield. A gun was pressed to my son's small temple. Cassian was sobbing, his face wet with tears, his little hands gripping Minsok's arm. "Drop the weapons." Minsok screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "Drop them or I paint the walls with his brains." Changu froze. The rifle dipped. I didn't freeze. I calculated. Distance, 15 meters. Target, Minsok's left eye. Obstruction, high. I looked at Changu. He looked at me. In that split second, the betrayal, the lies, the exile, it all evaporated. We weren't lovers. We weren't enemies. We were parents. Together, Chan-gu whispered. On my mark, I replied. We moved as one. The library was a crematorium for words. Centuries of history bound in leather were curling into ash as the fire, fed by the oxygen rushing in from the shattered foyer, licked up the mahogany shelves. The heat was a physical weight, pressing against my eyeballs, sucking the moisture from my lungs. But the deadliest thing in the room wasn't the fire. It was the man standing in front of the burning hearth. Min-sok was unraveling. The polished, stoic head of security was gone. In his place was a creature of sweat and frantic, trembling rage. His arm was wrapped tight around Cassian's throat. The barrel of his Glock was pressed so hard against my son's temple, it made a dent in his soft skin. Stay back. Min-sok screamed, spittle flying from his lips. I'll do it. I swear to God I'll open his skull. Chan-gu stood 10 feet away, swaying like a broken tree in a gale. His blood was dripping onto the Persian rug, counting down the seconds of his life. But his gun was steady. His eyes were locked on Min-sok. Why Min-sok? Chan-gu asked, his voice low, ignoring the flames roaring behind him. You were my brother. I was your servant. Min-sok roared. I built this empire while you played king. And then you brought her in. He jerked the gun toward me. You softened, Han. You started looking at floor plans for nurseries instead of supply routes. You became weak. I did this to save the organization from your sentimentality. You didn't save anything, I said, my voice cutting through the crackle of the fire. I stepped up beside Chan-gu. We were a united front, a dying king and his exiled queen. You just burned it down because you were jealous you could never sit on the throne. Shut up, bitch. Min-sok shifted his aim toward me. That was the mistake. For a split second, the gun left Cassian's temple. I locked eyes with my son. Cassian was terrified, tears streaming down his soot-stained face, but his eyes, they were Chan-gu's eyes. They were analyzing. They were waiting. Cassian, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. Do you remember the bee sting protocol? Min-sok blinked, confused. What? Cassian's eyes widened. He remembered. Anaphylaxis drill. When the throat closes, you drop to the floor to preserve oxygen flow. You become dead weight. Now, Cassian. I screamed. Drop. Cassian didn't hesitate. He went boneless. He slumped instantly, his entire body weight dragging down on Min-sok's arm. Min-sok stumbled, his balance compromised by the sudden dead weight. You little. But Cassian wasn't done. As he fell, his hand jammed into his pocket. He pulled out the small, metallic spider robot, the one Chan-gu had helped him optimize in the playroom. He squeezed the chassis. Screech! The robot emitted a high-frequency feedback loop, a sonic weapon Cassian had accidentally coded days ago. It was a piercing electronic shriek that shattered the air. Min-sok flinched. It was a microsecond of instinct. He clamped his hands over his ears, the gun waving wildly. Chan-gu. I shouted. We moved in perfect lethal synchronization. Chan-gu didn't shoot. He couldn't risk hitting Cassian. He threw himself forward, a human shield diving into the line of fire. Bang. Min-sok squeezed the trigger blindly. Chan-gu's body jerked mid-air. A spray of red mist erupted from his chest. He hit the floor, sliding over Cassian, covering his son's small body with his own broken frame. Min-sok looked down, a triumphant grin twisting his face as he leveled the gun at Chan-gu's back for the kill shot. He forgot about the ghost. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I stood my ground, raised the Sig Sauer, and exhaled. The world slowed down. I saw the bead of sweat on Min-sok's forehead. I saw the madness in his eyes. I saw the realization dawn on him that he had made a fatal error in target prioritization. I squeezed the trigger. Thwip. One shot. The bullet entered Min-sok's left eye and exited the back of his skull, taking his jealousy, his ambition, and his life with it. He dropped like a stone. Father. Cassian screamed from beneath the pile of bodies. I dropped my gun and sprinted across the room, skidding on my knees beside them. The heat was unbearable now. The bookshelves were collapsing, raining sparks around us like hellfire confetti. I shoved Chan-gu's heavy body off Cassian. Cassian, move. Get to the window. Cassian scrambled out, unharmed but shaking. I turned to Chan-gu. He was on his back, staring up at the burning ceiling. His shirt was a ruin of blood. The bullet had taken him high in the chest. Han, I choked out, pressing my hands directly into the wound. The blood was hot, pulsing against my palms. Han, stay with me. He coughed, a wet, hacking sound that brought pink froth to his lips. His eyes found mine. They were glazing over. Did I catch him? He whispered. You caught him, I sobbed, ripping the hem of my tactical vest to pack the wound. You saved him. You stupid, stubborn man, you saved him. Good, he wheezed. His hand, heavy and stained with soot, fumbled for mine. He gripped my fingers weakly. The fire, it's warm. No, you don't get to die. I leaned over him, using my body to shield him from the falling debris. I was pressing down with everything I had, trying to keep the life inside him. I did not walk through hell and back just to watch you quit on me now. Breathe, Han. That is an order. The roof groaned. A massive beam crashed down on the other side of the room, sending a wave of sparks over us. Sirens began to wail in the distance, the first sign that the outside world had noticed the dragon's fortress was burning. Chan-gu's eyes fluttered. He looked up at me, seeing the tears cutting tracks through the soot on my face. He saw the fierce, terrifying love I had tried so hard to hide. You came back, he whispered, a ghost of a smile touching his bloody lips. I leaned down, pressing my forehead against his, our breaths mingling in the smoke. I never left, Han, I promised him, my voice breaking. I just had to find my way through the dark. His eyes closed. His grip on my hand went slack. Han? I looked at Cassian, who was huddled by the window, watching us. We have to move him, I said, my voice turning into the steel of the surgeon. Grab his feet, Cassian. We are leaving this house. All of us. 6 months. That's how long it took for the scars to fade and for the winds to sweep away the last of the ash from the old fortress. We didn't just rebuild, we reinvented. We built a world on top of the ruins, one where the walls were made of glass instead of limestone, inviting the sun to witness our survival. The new estate is a modern paradise of jasmine gardens and open spaces, though beneath the beauty lies a security grid that would make the Pentagon look like a playground. I adjusted the lapel of my white Dior blazer, the silk cool against my skin. My stethoscope hung loose around my neck, my silver chain of office. I wasn't just the woman of the house. I was Dr. Janiyah Wright, director of the Han Medical Foundation and the architect of our new legitimate future. This is sensitive business, Mrs. Han, the man across the desk sneered. Mr. Choi, a logistics partner from Incheon who still smelled of old-world arrogance, barely spared me a glance. Perhaps you should check on the dinner menu? The men have grown-up things to discuss. Chan-gu sat in the leather armchair opposite him. He didn't roar. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply leaned back, his hand resting on the head of a sleek ebony cane, the only visible trophy from the fire that had tried to claim him. The slight limp he carried now didn't signal weakness. It made him look like a lion who had seen the end of the world and decided to walk back from it. Chan-gu smirked, his eyes glinting with a dangerous kind of pride as he gestured toward me. She's not asking for your permission, Choi. She's giving you a diagnosis. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I pulled up a file on my tablet and slid it across the mahogany. Mr. Choi, I said, my tone as clinical as a morgue. You're skimming 3% off the medical shipping routes. It's sloppy work. But more importantly, I've reviewed your vitals. You had a pacemaker installed in 2021. The encryption on that specific model is a joke. I could hack the frequency from this iPad and stop your heart before you even finish your scotch. Now, do you want to sign the new contract with the 15% royalty fee? Or shall we see how long your battery lasts? Choi turned a sickly shade of gray. He looked at Chan-gu, seeking a mercy he wouldn't find, then back at me. With a hand that trembled violently, he signed the paper and fled the room. You're getting meaner, Chan-gu murmured, standing up. He crossed the room, his gait uneven but his presence absolute. I'm getting protective, I replied, stepping into his arms. The scent of him, sandalwood and rain, was the only thing that could truly quiet the ghost inside me. The door burst open before he could kiss me. Mother. Father. Look. Cassian skidded into the room, holding a drone that looked like a metallic dragonfly. I fixed the stabilization gyroscope. I bypassed the altitude limiter. It can hover silently for 3 hours now. Chan Gu laughed, a rich, unburdened sound that filled the house. He pulled Cassian into a one-armed hug, then looked at me over our son's head. His eyes were soft, the voids finally filled with light. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a delicate diamond, it was a heavy platinum band engraved with the Han family crest. For the partner who saved the Empire, he whispered, sliding the weight of it onto my finger, and the woman who saved my soul. I looked at the ring, then at the 2 men who were my entire universe. I used to clean up the blood of strangers for minimum wage. I used to be a ghost in my own life. Now, I run the city that tried to break me. The smell of bleach is a distant memory, replaced by the scent of jasmine, the heat of the man I love, and the future I fought to keep. But as the sun sets over the Han River, bathing the city in a bloody crimson glow, a sleek black motorcycle pulls up to the outer gates. The rider doesn't speak. He drops a heavy black envelope into the mailbox and disappears into the night like a shadow. Inside, tucked beneath the flap, is a single grainy photograph of me from my days as a ghost operative, covered in blood, holding a weapon, and looking very much like a woman who hasn't finished her work. Across the bottom, written in red ink that looks far too much like fresh blood, are 6 words. The past never stays buried, Agent Wright. See you in the spring.
I love these stories. I love that the women's character are intelligent, smart. Keep writing. I'm sharing your stories with my friends.